Okay, this is a video associated with Unit 3, Activity 1. We're just going to talk a little bit about sampling. Sampling is a way that we can learn about a large group of items without having to collect data on every single item in the group. So for example, if I wanted to know what Canadians think about Justin Trudeau, sampling is a way that I could learn what Canadians think as a whole without actually going out and asking every Canadian. So the first method is just what's called simple random sampling. I sample a random number of the total group, and every person in that group or every item in that group has an equal chance of becoming part of the sample. So, for example, in a class of 10 students, how can I pick a random sample of 4? I can't just pick the first 4 who walk in the door. I can't just pick the 4 sitting by the window because those might not be a representative or a random sample. So instead, what you need to do is have some kind of method to randomly pick students. So it could be a 10-sided dice, or pick a number from a hat, or maybe a random number generated on a computer. That will ensure that everyone has an equal probability of being selected. The second type of sampling is what's called representative sampling. So the example that the slides give is I'm trying to find the average height of this new flower called a mathley flower. I want to randomly select 5 of the 10 plants. But I want to ensure that I'm picking some plants in the sun and some plants in the shade to make sure that both groups are represented in the sample. So again, if you want to look through the slides to kind of understand the example, you're welcome to do that. I'm picking half of each group. Another example I could do if I wanted to learn, students at Beale favorite place to eat lunch was, and I wanted to make a representative sample, I could make sure that I was picking randomly a quarter of the sample from grade 9s, a quarter from the sample from grade 10s, a quarter from a grade 11, and a quarter from grade 12. So I made sure that my samples were representative. So a lot of companies doing marketing, they might try to sample an equal number of people who live in each province, or a representative number of people of different ages. That would be called stratified or representative sampling. The last thing we should talk about in terms of sampling is we always want to avoid, when possible, bias. So if we don't design a survey or an experiment properly, we might get bias. So there are different types of bias. The first type is response bias when you ask a leading question. So if I put on a survey, what's your favorite subject? My favorite subject is math, and math is the most useful. I'm kind of leading you towards an answer of math. So response bias is when the question in the survey leads you to an answer. So if Coca-Cola was designing a survey and said, is Coca-Cola your favorite soda? That might be response bias, instead of just saying, well, what is your favorite cola? And leaving the options up to the respondents. Another example is selection bias. So for example, if I wanted to know students' favorite sport, but I only asked the basketball team, that would be an example of selection bias because I'm not selecting a representative group of students. And the last one is called non-response bias. It's people don't complete or return a survey. So nowadays, you'd be really careful when they're doing political polling. If you only call landlines, you might get a non-response bias. A lot of younger people don't even have landlines. They only have cell phones. So you might then have a non-representative sample because of the way that you're conducting your survey. If I was doing a survey on how the elderly feel about the COVID vaccine rollout, but I only was collecting data by email, I might have a non-response bias problem because the people who have email might, not mind the fact that they need to make appointments online, for example, for the vaccine. So those are some examples of bias when you're doing sampling. So those are kind of the 3 concepts we talked about today: representative sampling, simple random sampling, and then the different types of bias that might exist within your sample. Okay, that's all for now.